Welcome, everybody, to my free monthly group coaching call. I'm Susan Campbell. Today, I wanted to offer some statements that help bring your conversation right into the present moment. But first, I want to say a few things about how distracted we probably all are at various times in our lives. In other words, our attention is not all available to the present moment. You might be on this call, for example, and what if you have to pee during this call and you try to push that out of your foreground? We call what's in your foreground the foremost attention seeking thing in your field. We call that foreground. So having to pee becomes increasingly more urgent, and that interrupts your ability to pay attention to what else is going on here. It takes some of your attention. Or maybe you're here and earlier you had a fight with your roommate or somebody else, and you're trying to be here, but that conversation keeps coming back, that sort of thing. So I just want you to see if you get the notion of how often our attention is not all available for this moment. Probably it hardly ever is. And learning how to have more agency over where your attention goes, or at least be aware of it. The awareness is what I'm emphasizing here today is, oh, I can't really fully be here because I'm triggered by something somebody said earlier, or I'm worried about something I have to do later. So just check in with yourself right now. Let's just be here for a moment and notice whatever you notice, and you can have your eyes open or closed. Because sometimes you might want to notice what's on the screen, or you might want to notice something that would be a distraction to have your eyes open. You might want to notice body sensations. So just see wherever you go, what's foreground. Is it a sensation, something you hear, see, think? Thoughts are especially the things that grab our foreground. Thoughts about something that's not really here and now. We're not making anything bad or wrong here. We're attempting to bring more awareness to our present state. And sometimes I and other facilitators will start groups with a question like, how present are you in this moment? Some people will even say on a scale of 1 to 10, how present are you? Just notice whatever comes up with response to that. And notice if your foreground changes, might change a little bit. Keep shifting. And you might be ready to stop this inner guided reflection now, and some of you may want to go on for a long time with it. Just notice what comes up in you when I say that. So I'm going to stop this reflection now, and when you're ready, just take another deep breath and come back to paying attention as best you can to what's going on here and now for you. So the idea behind what I'm going to bring up today is that your communications have more aliveness, more power, more impact if all your attention is right there in the present moment. And of course, you'll be more attuned to another person and to yourself as well if you have what we call free attention or available attention. But the challenge that I think is there for most of us is there are many things pulling at our attention right now. But these 7 statements that I call the 7 statements necessary for relationship success are prompts to bring your attention back into the present moment, or at least to help you notice what's pulling at your attention and address that so you can address that with your conversation partner and bring things back to the now. So I'm going to do a screen share and then I'm going to copy and paste that into the chat. So we'll be looking at those statements for a little while and feel free to interrupt with questions all during this, and I will leave time for questions and comments and that sort of thing at the end as well, or at halfway through. I'm not sure how long this presenting the 7 statements will take, but here is the screen share. So just take a look at that. They're all right there now. And I'm going to say something about each one. And after I speak a little bit about each one, I'll invite comments and questions. So I'm going to copy and paste that into the chat. Well, maybe I'll stop the share and then copy and paste it. Well, let me try it this way first. Oh, no, I can do it this way. Okay. Can you see that in the chat? All right. Thank you very much. So before I even jump into this, I'd like to offer some space here. Anybody got something that's just in your foreground and you'd be more present if you spoke it? Let's just see what happens when I invite that. And just notice what your thoughts are as you look around the screen, as you hear my voice, that sort of thing. So about this first prompt, by the way, these are all from my book, Saying What's Real. Some of you are familiar with that book. It's the book I wrote right after Getting Real. And I talked about the first statement in the book, Getting Real. I talked a lot about the first statement, hearing you say that I feel. The examples I gave in Getting Real were how when I'm with a couple and they're in some kind of conflict or conversation about content, like we should do it this way, no, we should do it that other way, that sort of thing, I will invite them to one person just starts with whatever they've got, and their partner replies, hearing you say that I feel. And then the other partner responds, hearing you say that I feel. So it's like hearing you say that I feel tense. Hearing you say that I feel tense. Hearing you say that I feel relieved. Hearing you say that I feel more connected to you. It can go sort of like that. You never know where it's going to go. But when couples do that kind of exercise, I've found that you can start out very contentious, but if you just stay on the feeling level, you can get to something that's much more connected, even if it's not agreement. So my publisher picked up on that and she said, you should write a whole book about hearing you say that I feel. And so that's what led to saying what's real. Uh, but I didn't have a whole book that I could write about that one statement. So I made up six more to make it into a book. That book's out of print, but you can get it as a Kindle on on Amazon, or I can send it to you from my website for something like three 95 or 5.95 or something like that. Okay, Liz has her hand raised. You want to say something, Liz?
Yeah, okay, I unmuted. So hearing you say, I'm thinking of the couples that I work with and how there's a lot of assumptions that people can cleanly know how they feel, that they know that feeling doesn't mean action. I feel like it seems like it can go, you need to do a lot of scaffolding. Am I right? That someone hears, I feel blamed, right? And then there's all this reactivity.
Oh, yeah.
And it seems like there's a lot of work around being able to even have those statements be said and manage reactivity. Is that right? Do you find you
Yes.
have to do that
Yes.
a lot?
Yes. And then there's, besides the hearing you say that I feel right down here, it's I'm getting triggered would be another statement that, okay, we teach all of these statements together can help you manage the fallout from the first statement. Let me put it that way for now. And I think as I go down the list, you'll see how each one of these kind of enhances the others because one of these doesn't always uh, bring you fully present. Sometimes it brings you into a triggered state, which
Right, right. So
and
yeah,
then,
I'm jumping the
then
gun
yeah, and then
probably.
well, I'm glad you're bringing it up though,
Okay, good.
because it's in your foreground, it's on your mind.
Yes.
Yeah. And,
Thank you.
and so then we know if there's a facilitator in the room, uh, we help them learn to notice, okay, there's something unmanageable here that's difficult going on, and how do I phrase that, and what do I do with it? So, well, that'll come up when triggers happen, which is statement number three here. Um, let me just give another quick example, or I actually haven't given a really good example yet of hearing you say that I feel. But let's say somebody gives you a compliment, and that should be an easy thing to field, to receive in a present-centered way. But how often do we pass off the compliment and say, "Oh, I love that dress you're wearing. Oh, this old thing." Or, "Yeah, I got it for $3 at the flea market." Now, those are fine statements, but they're often a bit of a pattern that you have to give a quick comeback instead of receiving the compliment, letting it in, letting the other person see that it impacted you. So just reflect on simple things like that. How often do you just give an automatic response rather than checking in with your feeling? Or the famous statement, "Do I look fat in this dress?" Uh, so Mary says to Bob, "Do I look fat in this dress?" Bob at first doesn't notice how uncomfortable he's feeling. And he starts to give a real automatic response, like, "Oh, you always look good," something, that he's been trained in this society to do. But what might work for deeper intimacy with self and other is, "Mary, hearing you say that, I feel somehow uncomfortable. I got a tightness in my gut when I heard you say that." And I'm thinking to myself, is there a way to give the right answer here? And he just shares whatever his self-talk is. We call that self-talk. So the hearing you say that I feel prompt is a prompt to slow down and check in with yourself. And once you start doing that, you notice I had a little bit of humor and friendliness in mind. When you really can be more fluent on this level of just checking in and saying what you're feeling, you're not as defended about what you're saying. Like, you say it in a rigid tone of voice because you're scared of the response. So this really does just expressing feelings more fluently without a big attachment. See, all of these are just you being on your own side of the net. In Getting Real, I make a big deal out of staying on your own side of the net. Some of you have heard me talk about this. You speak about your feelings, your self-talk, you're revealing what's inside of you, and that's so much easier to hear than a blaming statement. Like, oh, Mary, you're so insecure, you always need other people's opinions. Don't worry about what I think, stuff like that. You know, a lot of us just can't help ourselves. We want to improve somebody or improve the situation. And that's being over on the other person's side of the net. So it's a discipline. I'm not saying you should always refrain from criticizing or giving advice, although I generally recommend that you notice. So I've got some advice for you. Do you want to hear it? Like setting the context. So that would be another statement necessary for relationship success, which comes later. Can we talk about how we're feeling? That's down the list a little bit here on this seven statements thing. So any comments or questions about what I've said about this first statement, hearing you say that I feel? Can you kind of see how it brings things right into the moment? But any comments, questions, ideas? And then I'll go on. If not. Okay, the next statement on the list here is I want. One of the biggest mistakes I
Sorry
think
to
people
interrupt
make.
you, Susan.
Oh, yeah, please. Hey, Adrian.
Hi.
Hi.
So on the topic of attention, I've got really heavy duty equipment in the background here that's distracting me, but I'm also hearing some
Oh,
background noise here on the call, and and you're talking and I'm trying to focus, but I'm hearing background something
I'm
going on.
I'm looking for mute all. I usually have that here. Thank you for letting us know. It's funny, I usually have a mute all button. Check. Well,
I'm still hearing it.
I'm going to ask you to all mute yourself because I think it's usually here at the very beginning of a call, but maybe it disappears. I regret not doing that earlier. Now that was helpful though. Everybody muted themselves, it looks like. And of course, if you want to speak, unmute yourself. So that's your responsibility from now on. So let me get back to one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they think they're expressing their wants is they will say, I want you to be more romantic, or I want you to be more responsible. So they're not specific about what they want. They're very vague. What does romantic mean? What does responsible mean? Of course, if you if you're practicing these skills, if you hear a word like more romantic, you'll say, hearing you say that you want more romance. Could you tell me something you'd like me to do that would feel romantic to you? You ask for specifics. That's really your responsibility in communication. I'm I'm in a friends couples group. There's no leader, but you know, I'm leading in my own head because I can't stand how some of the couples talk to each other. I want you to be more attuned to me, and here's how you can do that. Instead of when I don't feel that you're attuned to me, or when I don't think you're attuned to me, uh, I could say something. in the moment. So no, here we are. We've got a want in the moment. So that's another big mistake people make is they make these requests about here's how I want you to be for all time with me versus asking for something the moment you feel it, the moment it's up and relevant. Uh, you don't ask your your partner to well let me not use that example. Let's just stay with when I feel something, that's the time to ask for it. And also one other caution is when my partner is not obviously doing something else. Like you don't ask your partner to help you rearrange the furniture in the dining room when they're watching football, something like that. So you just, I mean, silly things, but people make a lot of blunders asking for what they want, probably because it's a sensitive topic. Most of us have wounds from childhood around having needs not met. Really. I mean, this is getting now into trigger territory because when I even think of asking my partner for something intimate, like what I want him to do for me sexually to help me be more turned on, that sort of thing, I could totally freeze if I have a history, you know, when I even think about asking, if I have a history of feeling like my needs didn't matter as a little person, that my parents were too distracted or possibly they they just had too much. Yeah, basically, parents are pretty busy and they have a lot to do, or perhaps they actually have their own deficits like addictions or disorganized personalities and things like that, where their attention is always divided, is always compromised, and that meant that they couldn't give you the kind of attention you really needed as a little one. So I think almost everyone has wounds around feeling rejected or not attended to or not significant. Michael and Sarah, which one wants to talk? Michael.
Me, I'm sorry. Uh, let's see. Yeah, hearing you say that, I recognize that in like a lot of Sarah and I's discussions, confrontations, if it starts to get away from me, I will recognize a want I have,
Mhm.
but but it normally comes up as me asking her, well, would you like to be held? And then she's like, no, I do not want to be held. And And I guess I never say, well, I'd like to be held. I mean, that's a want that I have right now just to kind of
Yeah,
the
nice.
brakes.
That's nice to see that. Yeah. Thanks, Michael. So, I think you get an, oh, Adrian, let's hear from you.
Yeah, so yeah, you're absolutely right. In my experience about saying, expressing what I want, and I've done this with other like friends where I'll say in the moment, and maybe it's because I don't frame it in that would make me feel really nice if you were able, yeah, like to
Mhm.
kind of give a little more context about how it would impact me if you were able to meet this need. Um, because I get a kind of a resistance from the other person,
Mhm.
one person in particular, and I feel it's a kind of she's a spiritual person, so I think she's kind of thinking, well, that's your responsibility to make to deal with it, to attend to your own nervous system. If you can't, to take care of yourself, it's not you're trying to control me and make me responsible for how you feel. So I think that gets kind of fuzzy uh,
Mhm.
about in this on this topic. And there was another thing, but I've forgotten.
Let me comment just for a minute, and maybe you'll think of it too, is you don't have to be um, a, coming from like a spiritual framework of wants are the cause of suffering, which would be a Buddhist response, or you don't have to be, you're responsible for meeting your own needs. You don't have to be coming from that perspective to be uncomfortable when somebody just says, can I tell you what I want right now? Or just, I want. An awful lot of people and are um, caught off guard and actually triggered when you say what you want, even if you say it in with setting context and like you alluded to in the beginning, Adrian. It would help me so much if you could hear this want and then you're going to say the want. So even if you set the context and make a heart connection, people, there was a certain type of person who resents you for even asking for what you want because they don't feel like they have the agency to say no. And then once again, going back to triggers and unfinished business from childhood, my mother burdened me with her feelings so much. I don't really want to hear somebody else's wants. I kind of get dissociated when somebody wants something from me because my father was gone and I've heard this from clients, and I was 8 years old and she's unloading all her problems on me. And I'm an only child. That's a fairly common wound story among men clients that I have had, actually. Now I'm feeling sad. Yeah. So that's enough about wants. Oh, did you think of what else you wanted to say? No, you're good.
No, not yet.
Come back later. So the next one on the list is I have some feelings to clear. And this helps keep your attention in the present moment because you realize your attention is not in the present. So some of these phrases just move the conversation right into the present. Others move the conversation to something that's interfering with you being present. And this is one of those, I have some feelings to clear. Almost everyone who has any kind of significant relationship will find that there's so much going on in any one interaction that you can't respond to all of it. There's like too much data to respond to, and or it's just not the right time to get into that little facet of the conversation. And so you brush it aside, or you don't even realize until later, oh, what I really wanted to say was this other thing. So we have to accept and be self-forgiving about the fact that we're not always all there, and we need rituals or practices to account for the fact that friendships, partnerships, work relationships all accumulate unfinished business, which then is really not good for the health of the person or the relationship. And sometimes, like in a workplace, I always tell managers, ask all your people for feedback. Even though you say, oh, I've got an open door policy and you can say anything to me, they don't come to you. You need to have them tell you what's bothering them so they don't go around the rest of the organization saying that stuff to other people. Now, the same would go for a couple. The same principle would go. You don't want your partner harboring thoughts about you that they didn't get a chance to clear, like that they were hurt by something you said. You you want to find a time when they can tell you that. So, and sometimes they're hurt and they need reassurance. I was I was hurt when you told me you were going out with Fred and you didn't invite me. And it made me think that I'm not as important to you as I thought I was. And then, so you need to be able to say that kind of a statement after you've used the words, I have some feelings to clear. Is this a good time? That would be good for the I want statement too. You know, I have a want. Is this a good time? Are you available? I have some feelings to clear. You want to, or I have some feedback. You don't just say to somebody, I have some feedback. You say, I have some feedback for you. Is this a good time? And what we mean by feedback is letting somebody know how their behavior impacted you. That's what I'm meaning by feedback. There's other definitions, but in personal relationships, that's basically what we mean. And saying, when this happened, this is what I felt. You know, I felt hurt. And then your partner can reassure you, or they can just say, hearing you say that, I feel tender toward you. When people are using these phrases, it's just much more quick to get to connection. So that's what these are aimed at, getting to the kind of mutual availability of attention that that feels nourishing and that feels safe. Connection, usually between yourself and somebody that you care about, usually creates safety. And disconnection is what creates lack of safety and fear and distance and triggering. So these are all def, uh, designed to create more closeness and safety. So let me get to I'm getting triggered. And that statement, like uh, like the hearing you say that I feel, both of those statements, you don't have to say out loud all the time. Sometimes you just want to go, hearing you say that I feel, to yourself, and then you know what you feel, and then whatever you say to the person is more informed by you being connected to yourself. So you don't have to use those exact words, but that's a good inner prompt. Same thing with I'm getting triggered. It, I mean, you can say, you know, I notice I'm starting to get defensive. That would probably be a skillful way to say it. In the book, I I make the statement, I notice I'm getting triggered, but then I have several different versions of that. Like, I notice I'm having a reaction. I think I'm getting a button pushed. I'm getting my not good enough button pushed. What you just said is triggering a reaction. I notice I'm having a reaction. So those are just alternative ways to use that key phrase. So you don't always use the exact wording that I've got here on the handout. But the idea, and most people first, the idea behind I'm getting triggered is to make it easier to notice that sort of thing and to accept it. I'm on a big campaign to help everyone get more comfortable with the fact that you will get triggered at very inopportune times. You will say something that you either regret or didn't fully mean, that comes from a fear place or an I'm not safe, I have to defend myself place in yourself. So those are reactions that come from that part of your brain, which is the survival alarm system. That's what brain scientists call this part of your brain. It's also the amygdala, it's in the midbrain, and it's further down in primitiveness than where you want to be coming from most of the time, which is your prefrontal cortex, which is up here. Prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain that can empathize and cooperate and that sort of thing. The amygdala is all about, I just got to get out of here or attack or feel safe. It's all about the self. When you're triggered, you don't have free attention really for the other person. Yeah, Adrian, what you got?
Okay, so further to what we were, the last question and answer you gave, the other person's triggered, and I don't want to drop into people pleasing and accommodating the other person's trigger. How can I work with the fact that they're triggered and I'm about to get triggered by their trigger?
Absolutely. Well, I've written two books about this. This is not the one, saying what's not the one, but one is 5 Minute Relationship Repair, and the other is From Triggered to Tranquil, where I offer the full prescription for you start out by being triggered, and eventually, and usually you don't notice it because, if two people are in a close relationship, they get co-triggered, which is what you just referred to. I hear they're triggered, and then I'm at least somewhat, I'm either going to be attacked or I have to get ready to do something I don't want to do. So, it's called co-triggering. So neither one of you is playing with a full deck, and there's no good conversation that's going to come until you're both calm and present again. So once you notice you're getting triggered, that just that statement will help you at least notice this more often, take responsibility for it more often, so it leads to less blaming other people in your life. But those people who are serious about having good relationships need to know we need to pause when we start to get losing it. It's either fight, flight, freeze, some kind of dissociation, folding, which just means you kind of lose all your assertive agency. So when you go into one of those reactive patterns, we need to get better, all of us, at noticing it sooner. But whenever you notice it, so you've been arguing for a couple of minutes, and then somebody notices it, they can say to themselves, I'm getting triggered, and she's triggered too. I guess we better say pause. So I recommend the word pause, and that important partnerships have a pause agreement. And I will have a pause agreement in groups that I'm leading too. If one person gets triggered and starts acting from a triggered place, this triggers other people in the group. And so I make an agreement at the beginning of my groups where I can call pause or anybody else can call pause if things are like going off the rails because of triggering. And it's our responsibility, once we accept that triggering happens, to calm our nervous systems, breathing, possibly taking a break and taking a walk, whatever you need to do to come back and let your nervous system know that you really are safe here. I mean, those words may have hurt you, but nobody's got a gun to your head. Now, if somebody's got a gun to your head, that's a little different than triggering. Okay, then you auto react with fight, flight, or freeze. But we're talking about emotional um, assaults that are generally words or lack thereof, lack of connection or words coming at us. So we, when we got lack of attention or hostile words coming at us when we were little, it really was damaging. But now we're big. This is what I try to remind people in the book, Getting Real. We still have that wounded child who thinks this is a survival issue when somebody doesn't like what you said, but it's not. But it still feels like it. So you have to nurture that reactive, tender part of yourself, get that back to feeling safe, and realize that you're not in any imminent survival danger. And that's got to be a conscious goal. When I'm triggered, I'm not like focused on trying to get the other person to stop doing what they're doing. I'm focused on pausing, calming my own nervous system, because the more I fight with the other person, the more the vicious cycle just keeps going on. We learn that from experience. But the two books that I mentioned uh, about triggering give you the whole curriculum. It's like a guided workbook, not just for couples, but for just you as an individual. Some of the chapters are for couples. Some are for you and your children, you and your friends, you and your workmates, or groups. So I cover triggering in a lot of different settings. But as you indicated, Adrian, there's a lot going on when there's some triggering happen. So you need to slow it down and get back into being present. Another comment? Okay. Let me go to I appreciate you for. Now, that, let's see, where is that? There it is. See it on the list. Um, that brings the conversation into the present moment in a sweet way. That that's meant to be something where you really get to say something you're feeling in the present moment, even if it's not something they're doing in the present moment. I appreciate you for how you washed the dishes last night. I didn't uh, I didn't know you were going to do that or something like that. You just simple appreciation. Appreciations work best when they're about something specific, although um, go ahead and be general if that's all that's coming to you. In other words, I appreciate you for how loving you are, but maybe a little more specific would be for how loving you are with our grandchildren, and specifically with Susie. She really needed that yesterday when you picked her up and held her. Oh, so that the more specific, the more impact, but don't worry about that too much because with appreciations, you're not usually going to trigger somebody else for not doing it right. Maybe, but then maybe you should come back to some of these other questions, like, can we talk about what we're feeling? That's the last one. Because if you start getting criticized for how well you did your appreciation, then you may want to bring that up. And we're not talking appreciations anymore. Um, so that kind of thing just builds more capacity and a stronger bond, and it feels good. I used to do a lot of family therapy. I don't do much of that anymore, but have the family sitting around in my office, and at the end of the session I would do a little ritual where everybody would appreciate somebody else in the room with something specific. And afterwards, they would always say, this was so common, not always, but so commonly, the family would say, this felt so good. Why don't we do this more at home? So it's just a simple thing that a lot of us didn't get appreciation that was real explicit when we were young, so we never developed that muscle. And I think it needs to be developed consciously if you know you're one of these people that doesn't know how to express love or affection or that sort of thing. So you could ritualize it. Actually, a lot of my clients just spontaneously tell me, "Oh, my wife and I have a appreciation ritual that we do every night, and we have a hugging ritual every morning." And I mean, I don't necessarily assign that as homework. People are just, well, when they've been working with me for a while, they spontaneously discover that, boy, that helps cut down on triggering. So let's see, any other questions? I'm going to go to the next one, which is a really advanced one, which is I hear you and I have a different perspective. And I hear you, you want to say, I hear that, you want to summarize. When you're doing this, really, you want to be able to summarize what you heard. Like, I hear that you want to forbid Susie from dating until she's 16. And I have a different perspective on that. Can I share mine? So that would, and then hopefully you'll then share yours. Well, I'm afraid she will just sneak around behind our backs. Well, you could come right out and say, I hear that you want to forbid Susie, and I'm afraid that she might sneak around. I mean, you don't have to use the extra invitation there if you're like a couple that uh, doesn't go to triggering at the drop of a hat. Some couples go to triggering uh, about so many inconsequential things just because you didn't say it quite right. So if you know that you have to be a little careful in your relationship, go ahead. But when I say careful, I mean careful to make sure that the other person is up with you, that you're not just taking the ball and running before they are with you. Like, are we ready to have this conversation now? You say yes, but I hear your tone of voice. When I hear that, I have a little sense of, is he really ready? So tell me more. Is there something that I'm picking up there, or is it my imagination? So sometimes you have to pick up when you sense something's off in the communication. You don't know what it is, and you just have to take a risk and go back to the hearing you say that I feel. That's that's kind of one of the most common things that we do need to use. And Bill, what have you got?
Yeah, that statement of I hear you and I have a different perspective would be something that would be really useful to use, like in Facebook conversations where people have different opinions. They don't start out with I hear you that you think this and such. They start out with, well, I have a different perspective, or they just flat out tell the different perspective. So I think a lot of times people don't take time to acknowledge others for where their viewpoint is. They just introduce an opposing one, which creates battles.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for that, Bill. Um, and this, hearing you and I have a different perspective, doesn't just cut down on the intensity of the conflict. What it does too is it teaches you to manage or to hold conflict, to be able to handle conflict, because so many people have trouble with conflict. Uh, I mean, who doesn't dread conflict or disagreement? And disagreement tends to be triggering, like, oh, if they feel something different than I feel, then we're not compatible, or this is, I'm gonna get dominated, or something. Any differences are
Yeah,
triggering.
feels threatening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you really want to make it your business if you're going to be an adult in this world to learn to manage conflict. And that starts with learning to hold differences in getting real. I talk about the holding differences, being able to have your point of view on the one hand and hear the other person's point of view over here and not lose your value on either one. It's not like I value mine and I don't value yours. I value yours and mine, and they can both coexist. Okay, we've got a difference. So here's the real uh, conversation. We've got a difference. What shall we do about it? Versus we've got a difference. You're the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Good.
we have so much diversity in this world, and it's just getting more and more diverse. So we must, if we're going to evolve as a species, we must handle conflict differently. And
I agree.
valuing both at once stretches you and makes you a bigger person that can actually handle more of the slings and arrows of life that come at you unexpectedly. Because we're really trying to grow ourselves to be able to have more capacity. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what my work is aimed at. Ava, you got something?
Yeah, thanks, Susan. So I was wondering when you say I hear your perspective or I hear you, I have a different perspective. Should you go into kind of like active listening mode and kind of summarize like or paraphrase exactly what you hear about them first before you go and explain your perspective?
That's a good technique too. I talk about active listening in the chapters on holding differences, that is probably the best practice you can use. Just let me you know, instead of using that exact phrase, you say, let me see if I've got what you said before I comment. And that buys you time too. Active listening means you repeat back what you heard the other person say as best you can. Particularly focusing on feelings if there were feelings there. So you say, what I heard you say was you're really mad at me for forgetting your birthday. Did I get that? And then sometimes the other person, and this is just in active listening, sometimes they'll say, no, I didn't say that, even though they did say that, and they'll say something else. You, as the active listener, need to be nimble enough to not get defensive when they say, no, I didn't say that, not get your back up, because that's normal in the active listening process. They will hear what they actually said, fed back to them, and they'll change their mind, or they'll realize that wasn't it, or they'll realize there was more to it. And so they'll act like you didn't even say that, and they'll add something entirely new. So active listening trains you to be nimble. It also slows down the reactivity so that you actually train yourself to feed back what the other person said rather than reacting quickly to it. That's what I mean by slows down reactivity. It's extremely valuable practice if there's any possible conflict. If there's real conflict, you should agree to active listen about it off, right out the gate. If you don't know there's conflict, but you think there might be, you still might want to use active listening as a tool. And it's just a great way to train yourself to stay calm while hearing a different perspective. So thanks for bringing that in, Ava. It's a hugely beneficial tool. And I like to think of it as a practice that two people agree on. Let's do active listening right now, because this could get contentious if we don't, or we could, or you could, this last one, can we talk about what we're feeling? That's sort of like, hey, can we do a little time check here and pause and see how we're both feeling? Gee, we're starting to get contentious. Maybe we ought to do some active listening before we start to try to problem solve. People often, especially like married people or people in business together, they get very task focused. Here's how we're going to do the job. Oh, well, this is actually something that where it's just coming up, so I'll tell you about it. My partner and I were trying to figure out how to get heat into a room, one of our rooms that didn't have enough heat. How to bring a heat duct from one room through the wall into the next room. And so we were laying out the design, and he said something, and I said, and so we're just task. We're not talking about feelings, just doing a problem solving. And then I said, that won't work. And what I should have said was, I hear that you like to route the pipes that way, and I have a different perspective. Would you like to hear? Or I should have, we found this out afterwards because he lost it basically, but we patched it up later. But we always learn from stepping in shit, how to correct it later on. And sometimes that's the best you can do. But, I said, okay, what I wished I'd said was, well, what I really said then was, what I wished I'd said was, tell me more, because this is another one that's not on the list, but it's a very good one. Tell me more about why you think that will work best. And so we did a redo. So that's another whole thing you can do here. This was like 2 days later, we went back and said, okay, start that over. And I said, tell me more about why you think that would work. And he started telling me, and this was so funny. He realized it wouldn't work. And that the way I had originally proposed was the right answer. And I wasn't trying to win. I had no idea that's what was going to be the outcome. But no, I think if you have these tools and you really use them, life just becomes more interesting. You're more present with each other. You can handle a little conflict. You're not so afraid of it because you know you've got tools to patch things up. Uh, Adrian.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a funny story, Susan. Um, yeah, it feels like you're kind of in a way, is it the spirit of cooperation or this because otherwise it feels like you're taking care of each other like you're almost like having to formulate your speech to accommodate or something. And I know that's not what you're saying,
Yeah.
but I'm like it sounds like it too.
Mm. Well, these phrases, there's the letter of the phrase, there's just saying it that exact way, and there's the spirit of it. So once you learn to use these as a practice, which can be kind of stilted and not sound authentic, you get the real value and the spirit behind all of them. And the spirit has you let go of your need to be right, let go of your need to be defensive and all of that, let go of your need for constant agreement. Um, these practices help you get in the game where it's kind of messy and navigate messiness in a way that where you won't avoid real conversations. So that is the point of it. And some people do complain that some of these guidelines that I offer sound a little bit rote and not genuine. But just you need to get where these are all leading you. And I want to say something about the last thing. Can we talk about what we're feeling? I did allude to that earlier, and then we'll wrap up here. Uh, it's a very good idea to check in with yourself many times a day to just check in with what I'm feeling and how I'm doing. And how many of us do that enough? Because we just get going in things. And when you're in the middle of a conversation, it's really important to be able to do that silently first. Can I check in with how I'm feeling here? And then, when necessary, when you judge it's good to do, you will say, can I pause this conversation? Can we check in with how we're feeling, how we're both feeling, that sort of thing? One of the most obvious uses for this is when you're in a boring conversation with somebody you know fairly well, but you're bored. You don't want to, you'd like to change the subject. And so you might say, can we check in about how we're both feeling right now? And the other person might find that a little abrupt, but do it anyway. If they seem to react in a triggered sort of way, which could happen, you address that. But the main idea here is you both get a chance to now talk, now tell, what's going on for you in this conversation? What's going on for me? Well, I was thinking I'm wondering how I can get a word in because although the things you're saying I know are important to you, I'm losing you because I'm not getting a chance to speak. And now that I've said that, I'd like to hear what that does inside of you, that type of thing. And there's lots of opportunities where we ought to be doing that. We ought to be saying, hey, can we have a little time check here, a little feelings check? And very, very often that will lead people out of the task conversation into a more feeling conversation, like my partner and I talking about construction problem. We should have been checking in about our feelings, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of times when people ought to be using this. In the book in the book Saying What's Real, I talk about this dating couple who haven't had intercourse yet. They've done heavy petting, and then one night after maybe their fourth date, they're getting into it, and they start to have intercourse. And she says, "Could we pause for a minute? I want to tell you how I'm feeling before we go further." And this is right in the middle of lovemaking. This is usually a time when people don't think they have permission to do this, but they ought to, because sometimes people are completely dissociated or distracted by their background thoughts. And so she says, I thought I wanted to to go all the way tonight, but I'm realizing that I'm not quite ready for that. And then he shares, and this is a real example that I heard from some people I were in a workshop. She says, or he says, "Oh, I thought you wanted to do it. I wasn't really ready either, but I got into my performance thing." And they just had such a deep and intimate conversation from a kind of mutual checking in with each other. So give yourself permission to do that more than you probably feel comfortable doing it. And I think I'm going to close with that because we're a little over time. I do want to thank everybody, though, and I want to look around and see who's here before we close. Yeah, thanks for coming on today. Yeah, hi, everyone. I remember you guys. I see some new faces too. Yeah, wow. Okay. See you next time.
Thank you, Susan.
Bye.
Susan.
Thank you.